So I think this is working. Welcome. Super excited to have you. My name is Bryant. I am a developer advocate here at Directus. I wear several different hats. You probably, if you have watched any of our content, you probably seen me on 100 apps, 100 hours, or on our YouTube channel talking about how cool building with Directus is. But today, we're actually going to be diving in and covering how to build an AI content machine with our new Directus AI extensions. Really excited about those. We've got 10 of these things lined up that you can use to build amazing applications, CMS, PIM, LMS, uh, whatever your use case. Directus is the tool for the job. All right, so today we are going to build this AI content machine. I'm going to break it down for you, and here's what's on the agenda. Beyond an AI content machine, what we're trying to build is really just a better content workflow. Um, here at Directus, we produce a lot of content. Um, and our approach to AI has been more of a let's make sure we could do this right before we wade into those waters. And that's why we have just released this set of 10 AI extensions, right? We look at AI as a tool rather than this crazy hype machine. I've never heard you speak at 1x. Yeah, cool. So as we go along, guys, if you have questions, kind of throw them in the chat. We'll save some time for Q&A at the end, but all good. So what we're really doing, right? We're building this better content workflow, and a tool like Directus allows us to build that with the flexibility to accommodate many different workflows. One that I'm going to show you today is just about blog posts and supporting content. So first things first, we're going to cover the challenges of AI generated content. Then we're going to show you the actual AI content machine, how this all works and how it comes together. Then we're going to cover how to actually how to structure this thing, how it gets built. And next, at the very end of this, I will show you how to get your own copy of this. So you could take this away and this weekend build your own content machine for your own company, for your clients, whatever your specific use case. We'll try to save some time for Q&A at the end. All right, so one of the major things with AI generated content is hallucinations and things like the quality of this. So, anytime you're doing AI generated content, we want to make sure that it lands well and remains on brand. So the first pitfall of a lot of AI generated content, and I've seen a ton of it, right, is quality. The normal quality, frankly, just kind of sucks. Uh, pardon my French, but it often falls short in terms of accuracy and relevance, which is, kind of our stance here at Directus as well. Like, we like AI, we're very interested in it, but not at the expense of our users or at the expense of providing misinformation. So AI can confidently produce text that it seems really plausible, but in actuality, or in fact, it's incorrect or contextually inappropriate. Right? This issue is called hallucination, where the AI or the LLM, whatever we're using, creates this information, spits it out to us confidently as if it's the answer, but it's not based on actual real data or real fact. One story that comes to mind that I saw on the news was a lawyer was using LLMs to research cases, and he was citing a case that the LLM just created out of thin air inside the courtroom, and he got into a lot of trouble for it. So without any editorial oversight, these errors or these hallucinations often can go unnoticed, leading to misinformation. A personal event that happened to us here at Directus, a company called Restack. It's an infrastructure platform where you can spin up instances of open source software. We're not affiliated with them in any way. And one thing that they did was deployed this crazy generative AI SEO campaign against us, where they crawled our documentation, had an LLM generate hundreds of crappy articles based on um, our own documentation, but they published all this stuff without any editorial oversight. And for some terms, they would rank higher than us, which caused a lot of confusion for our users. And generally, it looks bad on them, providing this misinformation. So quality is very important, and it's a challenge with AI. The next challenge is brand consistency or inconsistency, right? AI will produce content that is generic or derivative. It lacks the unique voice or creativity that we bring to the table as humans. Uh, I see what you mean, Emmanuel. Yeah, those restack articles, they suck. Not helpful at all. So this inconsistency, right, can cause your messaging as a company to feel very disjointed. I've talked with a lot of companies in the sign and print space. That's my side project. Is called Better Sign Shop, and a lot of them are interested in using AI for their marketing. But a lot of the LLM generated content is very generic. It just feels AI written, right? A lot of people write like they talk. AI is very verbose. So this inconsistency can be compounded when you have multiple contributors, right? I've got 6 different content editors or 6 different people on the team who are producing content, and variations in style and messaging. Um, we don't have a lack of we lack clear brand guidelines. That's another recipe for this brand inconsistency. And without that, it's easy to drift away from the core identity of the brand, which is something we value a lot at Directus. What is our brand, right? We serve developers. We're trying to make tools to empower you, make your daily lives easier. And one of the other causes of this inconsistency is just the various tools, right? We've got Google Gemini, we've got OpenAI, we've got Anthropic, we've got Perplexity, all these different AI tools, and then we have Google Docs, Markdown, different ways that we're actually creating this content. All that leads to inconsistency. And then last but not least here, the inefficient separate workflows. So the traditional content generation workflow. So if I'm putting together a blog post or a script for one of our videos, a lot of this happens outside of our CMS. It makes things clunky and inefficient, right? So there are multiple tools in the process. A writer or a content writer is drafting something in Markdown, and a text editor, if you're inside the guest author program here at Directus, or Google Docs or some other word processor that you're using. You're opening up ChatGPT to feed some stuff into it. Maybe you're actually using one of these AI writing tools, and then it gets to the point where we've got to publish that content. So this AI is generating this in a separate tool, and then the editors have to piece all this together, whether that's in a Google Doc or whatever your tool is. And then you have to bring that into your CMS to actually publish this, right? And that's also very time consuming, switching between these tools. And when you have all these different platforms, you got to copy and paste between them. Formatting gets messed up, lots of inconsistencies and headaches. So those are the main challenges with AI content generation, right? Let's cover our goals for this AI-powered content workflow, right? What do we actually want to do with this? First and foremost, we want to give our team velocity or our clients velocity, whatever you're building this AI content workflow for, right? We want to supercharge the team's productivity. We can automate those repetitive tasks, streamline the workflows, and that means our team can focus on the creative and strategic work, right? Reducing the bottlenecks in the process. We want to aim for consistency, right? it's important. It's absolutely crucial that the brand identity and the trust that you build with your audience isn't broken. We want to maintain that trust, right? And AI unchecked, uh, certainly it will get better, but right now it is easy with, you know, a slew of AI generated articles or just one AI generated article or mistake could ruin that trust. All right, so we want to ensure that the AI tools that we're using follow our same style, our same tone. They meet the standards that we would use personally if we're actually generating this content. We want this thing to be hackable, right? This is the good kind of hackable, not like a security flaw. But as things change, we want to be able to adapt our AI workflow. Directus gives you a lot of that in just all the different building blocks that we give you. You know, the flows, the content modeling, the editor, the insights panel. But by making this system hackable, right, we can customize it, tweak it when new extensions drop or a new model is created, or AI is moving really quickly. So we need flexibility. Directus is our hub, and we can build off of that. So it allows us to continually improve. Right? We want to iterate on this process, and last, we want this thing to be future proof. Right? Again, technology is evolving. AI, just the pace that I've seen over the last year is insane to me. Maybe that's showing my age. I do have 3 little girls, so yeah, that could be part of it. But we want this to be future proof, right? I don't want to be using a tool that's going to be outdated in a year. All right, so what we've done with this content workflow, we want to mirror kind of this normal workflow that people are used to. So the AI content machine that I'm going to show you begins with ideation, right? Our research, the AI is going to assist us in brainstorming topics, generating content outlines, suggesting keywords. It ensures our content is fresh and relevant. Writing is the next phase of this, right? The AI machine, content machine, is going to help us draft articles, social media posts, using templated prompts and guidelines so that we can publish content really fastly and move through that editorial phase. So the editorial phase where we once we've got the writing, we need to edit it, right? This is the missing piece for a lot of folks that I see. Yes, AI can generate this content really quickly, but editorial is absolutely crucial. So AI will generate the initial content. We can have it generate some images for us using DALL-E. And then we want to do this editing ourselves, this human touch, to make sure that it meets the brand standards and it's actually factually correct. And then last but not least, we've got the publishing stage. So having all of this entire workflow inside our CMS or our data management system is huge, right? And by mimicking this regular content workflow, this normal workflow, it feels familiar while we enhance efficiency. All right. So with that, let's bring this all together. Excuse me just a second. I'm struggling to shake a cough. All right. So how does this all come together? Let's take a look at our content machine. Can everyone see this okay? Should have Directus up. Great. Okay. All right. So for our content workflow, everything starts inside this actual workflow that we're going to kick off, right? So we'll give this thing a title. What are we actually wanting to generate with this, right? So since we are releasing our AI extensions, let's just do an announcement for that. So we'll give this a title, the Directus AI extension announcement. And we've got our first step, which is our inputs and our notes. So here is where we're going to add the context that OpenAI is going to use to generate some ideas for us. So in this case, I can upload audio and video content. Me personally, I really like to write how I talk. That's just my style. And when I sit down to write, often that can be a painful process, right? But if I am like talking to someone or to myself, as I often do when I'm recording videos, that is a lot easier workflow for me. So in this case, being able to record audio, even if it's just me like talking to myself, I can use this tool to generate content much more efficiently than normal. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull this up. I've got a Dropbox link that I'm going to use somewhere. Where are you, Dropbox? I've got Reich's keynote that I'm just going to drop here. So this is Reich's keynote for the AI release. I'm just going to drop in this file URL. I could upload a file. Again, I can also add text here in just a moment. So I'm going to save this, and let's just add some more context to this, right? Additional notes, mention Directus Plus in the announcement. All right. And I can also provide images. Behind the scenes in the extension, which we'll cover how this is all built later, we are using the latest ChatGPT models, or GPT 4.0, I think, for this specific workflow. So you've got access to vision. But now that I have my inputs, I'm just going to save this, and shortly I should have a transcript, but actually I don't here because it doesn't have access to the original file. Let me just remove this. Save. All right, let's try this again. Word to the wise, don't use Dropbox for this. If you do, make sure you change that query parameter. Always something on these live demos. All right, so in a few moments, like 30 seconds or so, I should have a transcript that is automatically generated and ready to go. I'm just going to refresh one more time. Or not refresh one more time. Let's see what's going on. Less than a minute ago. Update data. Okay, there's our transcript. Where are you, transcript? There we go. All right, just give it a moment. All right, so looking at my transcript, right, a couple of things stick out to me. We do not have a CTO or founder called Greg, right? So this is the importance of editorial, right? I want to make sure I review this transcript and make sure everything is correct. If I scroll through, we got Reich, which is a tool for project management, not necessarily a CTO. So I'm going to correct those few things. Again, none of these AI tools are perfect, but I hope you could already start to see some of the efficiencies you can gain with something like this. So now that we've got our inputs, right? My transcript is here. I've got some additional notes. We're going to reach for a flow. And the reason why we're not doing this automatically, which it could, based on events and triggers inside Directus, is that we could do all this automatically, but it's important to maintain that editorial. All right, so now we're going to generate content ideas based on a template that we have in the system. So I've got my blog product announcement. This is going to gather up all of those specific inputs that we have, going to send those to the GPT-4 model and ask it to brainstorm some ideas for us. And in the prompt that we have, we're also asking it to rate those ideas based on the target audience and the estimated popularity of this. So here, now I can see I've got 3 different ideas for the announcement of this actual post. And now I'm going to review these, right? So I've got the title, I've got my outline. We can see we've got an introduction, why AI matters. Here's the Directus launch. This looks pretty good. This is a pretty good breakdown. I could review some of these other posts as well. I've got my metadata, when this was generated from, what the keywords and things like that were. But now I'm ready to actually move forward with this, right? So next in the process, I'm going to generate an article. So I'm going to pick one of these. let's do the first one, announcing Directus AI, and then we're going to pick our voice. So these are, again, are just templated prompts that we've got set up. We could go with Bry which is not me at all, by the way. That is a Joy of Theming character on Directus TV. Make sure you check that out. Then we have Dev Pirate, which is a swashbuckling developer that writes in a pirate voice. And then we have Dry Ross, which you can see here is Ben Stein's character from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We'll just work with that specific voice. So again, we're going to pass all those inputs to the LLM model, and then it will generate an article for us. So, while this is happening, we can basically close this out and just wait a few moments. There we go. Obviously, it's still pretty quick. I would love for it to be quicker, and probably we'll get there at some point. But we can see we've got our post title. We've got a slug that's generated. Here is the post for the announcement. Why AI matters. The Directus launch. Here's a summary of all the extensions. It's picked this up from the actual transcript that we've provided. We've got all of the practical use cases, right? So I would normally do a ton of editorial here. Now I won't bother you guys with that, but as far as the flow, having this inside our CMS is a huge gain in efficiency. And if you don't prefer Markdown, obviously you could have it generate HTML and use the regular WYSIWYG editor for this. But being able to tag people on my team, like, hey, Ferris, how does this article look? Having this all in one system, hugely beneficial, right? So now we've got our article. I could go in and update some of this information. But then we get to our assets, right? To promote this, we're going to need social media posts. We're going to need images. And again, we're going to generate an image based on a templated style that we have. So I'm not sure exactly which one I'm filling today. Maybe this big arms, big leg style. So we'll run that specific flow. That is going to use the image generation extension that we have inside Directus Marketplace to actually generate an image based on the content of this post. That's what we'll be using for our featured image. And behind the scenes, what we're doing is actually 2 or 3 or 4 different steps in the process. We gather up all those inputs and we feed that into the GPT-4 model and then ask it to create a succinct prompt for DALL-E. So here we go. We get the big arms, big legs kind of character illustration. That looks great. And then the last thing that we need to do to properly promote this piece is generate some social posts, right? So we're just going to go through. We're going to pick the channels we want to generate posts for, in this case, X and LinkedIn. And then we're going to pick our template for the social. Again, I could pick a different voice, right? So if this piece of content is written by our CTO or it's written by me, maybe on social, we want to have a different voice promoting that. So, let's just have some fun with it. We'll use our Dev Pirate voice. And again, we're using the OpenAI AI Writer extension to generate these social posts. So I can open these up. Again, we've asked it to rate those. Ahoy, fellow developers. So it really nails the pirate speak. Kind of entertaining. Not something I would ever publish, but for the demo purposes here, really cool. All right, so that is the core workflow of this, right? We've got our content workflow, and it's important to kind of keep these artifacts and that generation, that iterative process, like separate from our actual content, right? So when we go to actually publish this, all I'm really concerned about is the actual title, the slug, the content, and our image, right? That's what we're storing. So the last step here is basically just scheduling this post. So we'll go in, hey, I want to schedule this for the end of this month. We'll hit run flow, and that completes our actual content workflow. Now, what that does behind the scenes, there's just a workflow, a Directus flow, that transports that or copies it over to our post. We can see we've got a draft here. Here's the date we're going to publish this thing. And I can set this to publish. We can add an author. I'm going to tag Ferris Bueller for this. And let's say now one of the other challenges that we have, we want to distribute this content in many different languages, right? We've got a ton of customers in Europe here at Directus. So how can we facilitate that using these new AI extensions? So we've got our translations set up inside this. We can see we've got our English version here. And again, just like on the actual content workflow, that generation, we've got a translate flow. So I could pick the language that we're going to translate from. I pick all the fields that I want to translate, and then I'm going to pick the language. So doing it this way versus just automatically generating gives me a ton of control over how many credits we use, or if I'm just editing a tiny typo or something like that, maybe I don't want to generate all of these other translations again. Maybe I just want to generate the piece that I've edited. So here we go. We've got this announcement in French. I could go through and do it for the other languages that we have as well. So we'll just do the same workflow for German. Great. And just in a moment's time, because we're using the DeepL API for this, we've got all of this content translated super lightning fast. Great. All right. So that is the entire workflow, right? We've got this thing published. Obviously, we've got a front end that is serving this content. But, in how many minutes do we have here? 10, 15 minutes. We have generated a post. We have translated it into all of these different languages. We've generated assets for it. We've generated promotion for it, for social media. And, now we're ready to rock on this thing. I see the questions, guys. I'll definitely circle back to them at the end, right? So that's the demo. That's how this all comes together. Now, how is this thing built? How do we structure something like this, right? So next, we're going to go through our data model and just how everything comes together. And then I'm going to show you behind the scenes what the flows and extensions look like for something like this. All right. So as far as our data model, that was one of the trickier bits to work out for this. And if you've watched any of the actual like 100 apps, 100 hours episodes, or any of our other content, that's usually where I start. I love like Figma or a whiteboard interface for modeling this thing out. But again, like I mentioned, one of the important things, like we want to keep these AI artifacts and the messiness of this creation process separate from our actual content. So we have our content workflow, which is basically a container for, hey, we're going to generate some content. We're going to run all these flows on it. And then we have our actual content, right? So that's the content is the output at the end of it. But inside our workflow, we have our inputs, we have ideas that get generated, we have generated images, and we have social posts. And I'll show this inside Directus in just a moment. On the content side, since this is a relatively simple example, we've just got posts, and then we have translations for those posts using our very nice Directus translations interface. Settings-wise, there's a few more than this, but it was important to keep that consistency, right? And how do we do that? I'm going to prompt the AI different than you might. So creating these templated prompts as far as like tones of voice that we want to use in our writing, our different image styles and our post templates helps us maintain that consistency and ensure we're hitting that brand voice that we want. So if we go back into Directus and I just show you our data model, right? We've got our 3 top level items that I was talking about there. And I could zoom way in on this. As far as the content workflow, what this looks like, it's a little messy because I'm using groups to put everything together, but we have a title, we have some steps that we're using, and then we have these different groups for sections, right? We've got our file section where we have our inputs and our SEO keywords that we're targeting. Then we have our ideas. Then we have our editing process. So within the editing process, we have our post title, our slug, our content. That's where these things are getting stored when we generate them. Then we have our post image. What's the featured image that we're using? Then we have our social posts, which are a relationship. And then last but not least, we have this publish section. Right? So if I was to pull these up side by side, which I should be able to do if I duplicate this. Really showing my arc ability here. All right, so we go in, we look at our content workflow. We'll just find the one that let's show our archived items. So once that gets completed, it gets archived. But you can see these groups are just basically the different sections that we have inside this specific form. And as far as like the normal like headless CMS, or this is kind of a departure from the standard way that you might be using Directus or any other like CMS tool, right? This is not really the actual content here. This is just built to facilitate this workflow. So inside our inputs, we have a type. We have the image type. We've got a file or file URL and some text that we can add. And then that transcript text field is where the transcription extension puts that once it's finished. Then we have our ideas, which are basically just a title, a rating, and an outline. And we have our images. So these are the generated images. If we take a look inside here, we could see we've got the actual image, but we're also storing this prompt, right? This is valuable information. If we wanted to try and generate a similar image, it would be very helpful to have this prompt again. And then we have our social posts. So just the channel, again, a rating, and the actual content that we're going to copy and paste to include. All right. Next, we have our content, right? So the content structure is really simple. We have a post, we have a title and a slug just for defaults, and then we have our translations interface within Directus. So this is super nice in that it shows us side by side our translated content. Shrink this back so I could see side by side French, German, Spanish. If I was manually translating this, or I can't, I don't speak German or read German, so I don't know if this is accurate or not, or how accurate it is. Maybe some of the folks that are German in the audience could help out with that, but super nice to have this side by side. And then last but not least, we have our settings, right? This is where preloading a lot of that work really helps. Inside our globals section, we have a base URL. We have a generated image folder. And it's nice to use these globals inside of our flows. Now, for this example, to ease development and testing, we're storing the API keys inside this globals section just to make it easy to test. Highly do not recommend that for production projects, right? You want to store those in your env file or inside your environment variables and move those keys to a safe store before you go to production. But for these purposes, super handy to be able to quickly reference those. All right, then we have our image styles, right? So we've got a couple different image styles that we want to generate. We've got a prompt for each of those. We've got a sample image. And then we've got some colors that we can pass to these things. Again, it just helps us maintain that brand consistency that we're after. We've got our post templates. So the post templates are made up of a title, a specific prompt. Right? You're an expert blog writer specializing in product announcements for developers. We want you to create blog posts from video and audio transcripts, and we really want to pass it as much context as possible about the outputs. So within this, we even have samples of what a good generation looks like, and that really helps tailor that actual content in the end. All right. And then we have our voices, right? So these are the voices that we want to write in, and they just describe the writing style of each individual person or persona that we want to hit, right? This is Bry Ross. He is soothing and encouraging. He often frequently praises his audience, where Dry Ross is basically monotone, factual delivery, dry humor, and understated sarcasm, right? So again, this is all about consistency. All right, so that is kind of the data model. That's how this thing is structured. All right, let's talk about the extensions that power this and how the flows are set up. So, I see within the chat, a couple of people didn't know that you can add forms to the flows, which is definitely a level up as far as like your Directus skill set or the actual applications that you're building. But the extensions that we are actually using for this, there are four. We have the Directus AI Writer that uses the OpenAI API. We have the Directus AI image generation extension that uses the OpenAI DALL-E model to generate the content, generate those actual images. And then we have the translation piece with DeepL, which is a really nice translation API. And then the Directus AI transcription uses DeepGram. Uh, they've got a couple of different models that are different than like the OpenAI Whisper model that are more efficient, and I think they give better results, at least in my testing. Right. So if we look at the flows, we've got this set of manually triggered flows, and that's where those forms that you saw, right? So if we just walk through a couple of these, like what do they actually look like? You open this up, it looks kind of scary because there's 8, 9, 10 operations within this flow, but it's really not so scary once you break it down, right? So for our generate content ideas flows, right, we are manually triggering this flow on the content workflow collection. So adding collections here gets us that button. Using the manual trigger, we can run these asynchronously. I've turned that off just so I can see the little loading point, but you may not want to run them synchronously. Asynchronously, basically it'll run in the background and not prevent you from moving on with your content. So we're going to require a selection. So I could actually do this from the collection, like the layout page, or inside the item detail. And then to get that form, what I'm going to do is select this require confirmation. And then we have the input fields, right? So I can go in here and use my collection item drop-down interface. And that allows me to select an item from within a specific collection inside Directus. All right, so I pick that, choose my display template. I can filter these out if I have templates that are inactive or draft mode that we don't want people using. So you could set this up a lot of different ways. But as far as what gets triggered, right, we receive a payload here that looks something like this, where we have our template. We have a key that we can use to access that template. And then we have our content workflow. Here's the ID for that. Right. So before we can use any of that information that gets stored inside that content workflow, inside that template, we're just going to look those things up. So that's what a lot of this is doing here. We're just reading that content workflow. We are reading the data from the template, and we are reading our globals. So you can see here, this says trigger flow. I've just got a separate flow. And this is one of the nice things about flows is the composability of them, in that I can create smaller flows and we can chain all of those together and use them to do things like loops, or in this case, just return our global information here. Great. All right, so then we have a bit of JavaScript here just to format our payload for the AI. We're looping through those inputs and putting them in the message format that OpenAI requires. And then we pass all of that to our AI writer extension. Right? So we've got our API key. We are using the latest model here in this case. The GPT-4 works very well, or for if you're looking for speed, GPT-3.5 is still very speedy. For tasks like generation of ideas or just brainstorming stuff, it still works pretty well for that. So we've got a custom prompt that we're adding. We're telling it a bit about our audience, the tone and style. We're giving it some requirements. And, one of the nice things here is you've got these predetermined prompts that you can use for a lot of these different extensions that we have. We're trying to make this super easy for you as far as like generating an SEO description. These are already optimized prompts that our team and the builders of the extensions have created for you. But, inevitably you need to go off script. We've got our custom prompt here. I'm supplying it a ton of context as far as what I want it to return. And then there's also an option to enable JSON mode here. So we pass it all of the context, right? We've got our SEO keywords. We're giving it our article title, the samples of our templates if we have them, so that it can generate the most accurate picture of what we want to output. Right? We get that response, we format it through some JavaScript, and then we go in and create those ideas and update our data. So that's what the general flow looks like. And for a lot of these is very, very similar, right? We are fetching our data that we're using to generate. We're going to format that for the AI writer. Then the prompt is obviously going to be different for like generating the actual article. We've got a voice that we're adding into that. And then we've got a template prompt that we are, letting it use instead of a hard-coded prompt here. But then we just update our data. So we've got generate content ideas. That's the first step in that workflow that we talked about. Then we're going to generate an article. And then we've got these extra flows, right? And we don't have to necessarily use AI to generate these images or social posts. It does help. We've got those extra flows. Then we have this scheduled post flow. Again, all these are manually triggered. Basically reads the content workflow, formats it, creates a new post in our post collection, and updates our content workflow to be completed, right? So last but not least, we have these extra utility flows, right? Especially when it comes to like the content translation. So that translations, that ease of use that we demonstrate here, when we're actually translating this from one language to another, and all that kind of happens automatically. It's actually two flows that are doing that work. And as you go through and you build Directus flows, you keep this kind of pattern in your mind because it is tremendously helpful. All right, so if we look at our translate post flow, we can see we've got a manual trigger. We're reading the data of that post. As far as like the actual query here, we're using the deep parameter inside the API. We're making sure we get the translations for the language from and the language to. And then within that, the next step after we grab the globals is formatting this, right? Within this JavaScript, we're actually checking to make sure that we have a translation, because that's going to affect whether we actually create or update. But within this, after we format that, we are passing an array of basically fields that we want to translate to a separate flow, which does the actual translation, right? This is our translate content flow. It is only triggered by other flows that we're using. So here, the trigger is just another flow, and we're returning the data from the last operation. So we grab the global information, which contains our API key for this, and then we are just translating the value that we receive to the language that we receive inside the trigger. And then we format a response, right? If it's a slug, we're going to slugify that thing, make sure it works well and doesn't break any URLs. But otherwise, we're just returning that translation along with the actual key that we passed. And at the end of this specific flow, again, we have a formatting step where we just put all that together inside a payload. and then we are deciding, we've got a condition here, if we have an existing translation, right, we're going to update that content. If the translation for that specific language does not exist, we are going to create it. So this is a good example of like branching within flows. I know these are really robust compared to some of the simple examples on the documentation, but I really think this tool will be helpful for you, helpful for your clients if you're building on top of Directus. Um, that's pretty much the breakdown of how this thing comes together, right? So if you are interested in getting your free AI content machine, you want this starter kit. The link to go to is directus.is content machine. Let me just drop this here inside the chat. That way everybody's got access to it. You go here. There is a zip file that you can download that contains the starter kit. It's basically just a bunch of JSON files, right? I'll download this thing. Let me actually pull this up. Where are you, Mr. Starter Kit? All right, so when I extract this thing, we can see there's a package JSON or a README that basically shows you what extensions you need to install. Those AI extensions, you do have to install those ones for this thing to actually work. You could do that from the marketplace, but it's basically just a collection of JSON files. What you do with this, you're going to need a Directus project, obviously, but you can register for a 14-day free trial on Directus Cloud. So just go to your Directus Cloud account. You can spin up a free trial project whenever you create a new team, or you can self-host an instance of Directus. We've got some documentation that shows you how to do that via Docker in 90 seconds or less. So the flow for this, basically, you will generate a static token. So once you get this instance up and running, you're going to go into that specific instance. Let me see if I can do this alongside, right? We will go to our users. We're going to generate a new token for this user down at the very bottom. We'll save it. We'll use that token. And then we're going to open up the terminal and run this command, npx directus-template-cli at latest apply. Once you do that, you're going to follow the prompts. You're going to select the local directory. So let me just copy this, make this nice and giant. If I can actually paste it. Did it? I don't think it copied it. Paste. All right. So once we do that, we follow the commands. We're going to choose the local directory option, and then you're just going to point to that directory where you downloaded the actual AI content machine. All right. Then you're going to paste the URL for your Directus instance, and then you're going to include a static token. This will load the template for you. And then the next steps that you're basically going to have to do, if we open up Directus, zoom out just a little bit, you'll have to go into the marketplace. You'll search for AI, and you'll see there is a transcription operation. There's the translator operation. There's the image generation operation and the AI writer operation. So you've got AI image generation, AI translator, AI writer, AI transcription. And if you are interested in this little component that I use here, where'd you go? This little step component to, just show where this is at. There's an extension for that as well. That is the extension steps component. All those are available inside the marketplace. You just have to search for them, and you can install those straight away. So this link will deactivate in 2 weeks, so make sure you get this. This will be moving to our Directus Plus program. And if you enjoy starter kits, I highly encourage you to check out Directus Plus. Right now, annual membership is only $99 per year. You get access to 6 other starter kits in addition to this one we're giving you today for free. We've got a learning management system, product information management system. So if you are trying to manage all your product data for e-commerce or technical product data for like a custom manufacturer, there's a great template for that. We have a status page template for your online services. We've got an onboarding checklist application that's great for onboarding new clients or employees. There's a video streaming platform that is similar to Directus Plus, and a multi-tenant SaaS setup, which comes up quite often. All right, so that leads us to the end of this presentation. Let's dive into some of the Q&A. I'll just go back up to the top here, see what we can see. Will a rerun of this be made available? Absolutely, 100% it will. Definitely make sure you send that small handling fee to Connected. $5.99, he can get you that replay. What's the best practice for CI/CD Directus CMS between dev to production environments? I think that could probably be a workshop of its own, right? But a lot of folks use our schema endpoints. So if you go to the documentation, there is a set of schema endpoints that will basically return the entire schema of Directus, like your fields, your collections, your relationships, in JSON format. You can also get that as YAML if you prefer that. But the process is kind of 3 steps, right? We get the current snapshot from the instance that we want to pull that from. Then we run a diff against that. So, I would run the diff against our production environment. This will generate a file that has a unique hash and has the differences in the different collections, fields, and relationships, wherever those changes are. Once we get that diff, then we can apply. So 3-step process. Basically, you pass that difference in the body of the apply command, and it will make those changes for you. And of course, a lot of people check these schema snapshots into Git for that. So is it possible to swap LLMs, or is it fixed to one LLM? The actual Directus extensions are locked to the specific LLMs that we provide. Let me actually pull this up. Localhost 8055. Yeah, so like the AI writer extension, for example, only works with OpenAI. These are actually, I think most of these are public, so you may be able to find them inside the Directus Labs repository as well. Yeah, if you want to use a different model, right, you can always also use the, let me just trigger this manual. You can also just make regular API calls using the webhook request URLs operation as well. So I can make a post request to whatever URL. So if we don't have a particular model, you've got an API for it that you want to call, you can either like duplicate those extensions and build them, or just use this webhook request URL to prototype. What other questions? I see a lot of people answering questions for everybody else. Looks great. Like to see that. What is the pricing model on token usage? So again, you are passing your own API keys to these particular services. So the pricing with OpenAI is obviously going to depend on what model you're using and the number of tokens. I think in the process of building and testing this specific workflow, I'll pull this up and actually tell you how much. And I have been beating this thing to death over the last week and a half. My actual spend so far has been $10.24. So over the last week, using the latest GPT-4 or O model and DALL-E 3, which I think was the majority of this, the image generations are a bit expensive. But that is, that's how much I've spent. So, it's not super expensive. I can imagine if you've got a large content operation, you're going to be spending more, but compared to the efficiency gains for something like this, the cost is pennies on the dollar, at least for most of my workflows or use cases. Oh, yeah. Definitely, it is. All these, you bring your own API key. We're not marking any of these services up. I would like to have the vector field in Directus for the database of a RAG app. In that, it is something I would love to see personally in the future. One of the things at Directus, we are very agnostic or unopinionated about the database, right? Beyond like a SQL database, you can use MySQL, SQLite, Postgres. I know there's like PG Vector, which is a a specific like vector for like a vector database plugin for Postgres. Because we have to support so many different database vendors, currently we do not have like a vector plugin for that. You could potentially try that on your own. I don't see why that wouldn't work. It may require some wiring inside Directus. You may be having to build an extension or touch some custom code to do something like that. Not entirely sure, but we do not have support for that currently. Cool. All right, guys. Well, with that brings us to a conclusion. Just wanted to share a couple other helpful links. I think I'll send a copy of the recording and of the slide deck to everyone who joined today. But definitely check out the quick start guide on our documentation. Our own Kevin Lewis shows you how to get started with Directus with Docker in 90 seconds. Locally, it is the quickest way to get started. Super easy. You can install all of these extensions. You can start building your own, and you can also download this starter kit and try it out yourself. Beyond that, make sure you check out Directus TV. So that is just directus.io/TV. We've got a ton of developer-focused shows that we create. A lot of those are actually coding with Directus. Some of them are it's just more content-oriented. Buzzword Wilderness is one of my new favorites by our very own Mr. Matt Miner, where he kind of cuts through some of the BS marketing terms that you hear a lot, like a DXP or what is the CMS. There's a lot more coming as well. So with that, I will sign off. Appreciate everybody joining me. Super excited. Hope you'll join us inside the Directus Discord community and tell us how you get on with these Directus AI extensions. Thanks for having me. I'll catch you guys later.